habe mich entschlossen, freiwillig aus dem Leben zu scheiden, weil ich erkannt habe, dass das deutsche Volk meiner nicht würdig ist.
That was an actor. Here is the man himself. The most filmed and photographed face in history. A mask for every appearance.
The Führer is always right.
Aber dass die Partei weiterleben wird, das weiß ich. Und dass über alle Personen, über Schwache und Starke hinweg die Zukunft der deutschen Nation erfolgreich gestalten wird, das glaube ich und das weiß ich.
At the height of his power, the Führer, the leader, is worshipped by millions of Germans in the country where he has come to live. Now listen to a different kind of shouting, in full cry after those whom the Führer hates. Here are the faces of some who resisted. For their bravery, they died. But, we ask today, how was it possible for these seemingly peace-loving, honest, industrious German people going about their everyday lives so easily to become the captive minds, the abject slaves of a man who could say,
"It is not by the principles of humanity that man lives or is able to preserve himself above the animal world, but only by means of the most brutal struggle."
But what did the Führer himself really think about those who hung on his words and roared their approval?
The intelligence of the masses is very restricted, and their ability to understand is feeble.
Any German, if he had liked, could have read these words in Hitler's own book, Mein Kampf. This is the man who promises to build the German people into a master race, the Herrenvolk, who could ultimately dominate the world. He tells them,
"The stronger must dominate and not blend with the weaker, thus sacrificing his own greatness. Only the born weakling can think of this as cruel."
How did this happen? What did it mean to the German people and to the whole world? This is what concerns us today. To find some of the answers, we must go back into history. The archives are rich in pictures and words, even in the days of silent films. The Great War is over. Germany is a republic for the first time in her history. The Reich President is Friedrich Ebert. There is much misery, much hunger, and hunger breeds unrest. The legacy of the Kaiser's imperial monarchy still weighs heavy on the land. The moderate Social Democrat Party and the center parties of the middle classes are flanked by extremists on the right and on the left. The extreme left clamors for a real revolution to wipe out the remains of the Kaiser's regime, the officials and the officer class who are still powerful. On the right, these self-same army officers command a Reichswehr which has been reduced by the Allied victors to 100,000 men. But they also give support to the Freikorps, gangs of ex-soldiers, adventurers, toughs and killers. Outbreaks of violence in the streets are bloody and frequent. In January 1919, the bodies of the two leaders of the left, Karl Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg, are found murdered in the Landwehr Canal in Berlin. To many on the right, the Treaty of Versailles, drawn up by the Allied victors, is a national disgrace. The German Democrats who sign it are called traitors. The glorious German army, they say, was not beaten in the field, it was stabbed in the back. The mark collapses. Inflation. Money loses any real value. Billions of marks have only the buying power of a loaf of bread. And who is to blame, ask the right. Why, the Allies who won the war, the Social Democrats, the Freemasons, the Pope, and of course the Jews, all are guilty except themselves. Such are the troubled conditions in which the young Weimar Republic strives to grow up. Munich, capital of Bavaria, is a hotbed of right extremists. One of the most influential is General Ludendorff, the man who commanded the beaten German army and who persuaded the Kaiser to surrender. To Munich also has returned Adolf Hitler, now 30 years old, an ex-soldier without work. Although an Austrian, he has served in the German army as a corporal and been wounded. The Reichswehr hires him as a secret agent. He is instructed to spy on a small group of people who meet in Munich beer cellars, soon to call themselves the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or the Nazis. Hitler joins the party. He says,
"It was the most decisive resolve of my life. From here, there could be no turning back."
A dynamic speaker and good organizer, as well as a born expert in propaganda, Hitler quickly becomes the party's leader. He organizes strong-arm gangs to protect his own meetings and to break up those of his opponents. He calls his stormtroopers the Sturmabteilungen, the SA. He is popular with the ladies of certain wealthy Munich families. One of them presents him with a whip of rhinoceros hide, which he always carries with him at this time. Among his early associates are faces which are to become all too familiar. Ernst Röhm, ex-army captain, homosexual, but a skillful organizer. Later, he is to become commander of the SA, a tough, brown-shirted army of some 2 million stormtroopers. Hermann Goering, captain in the Air Force in the First World War, a drug addict. Later, to become commanding general of the Luftwaffe, brutal, but with a child's love for gaudy uniforms and medals and the comfortable way of life. Rudolf Hess, also an ex-airman, a muddled, vague idealist, to become the Führer's faithful deputy. Alfred Rosenberg, self-styled philosopher, self-appointed expert on Eastern matters. His mythical nonsense will fit in well with his master's ideas. Julius Streicher, ex-schoolmaster, noted pervert, sadist, to become Jew Beta #1, editor of Der Stürmer, demanding the extermination of the Jews. Heinrich Himmler, ex-chicken farmer, by his looks a mild-mannered man, but to become head of the Gestapo and the SS, his brutality to be without equal. Dr. Joseph Goebbels, an ambitious intellectual and good orator, to become a brilliant exponent of propaganda under the orders of his master. Gregor Strasser, the only Nazi leader really to believe in the socialist ideas of the party and stick to them, later to be murdered by his Führer. All now pay allegiance to their Führer. In the years ahead, many of them will either betray him or he will betray them. These are the men into whose hands are to be given the destiny of the German people. In these early days of the 20s, the Nazis are not a wealthy movement. Except for a gift of 100,000 gold marks from Fritz Thyssen, the Ruhr industrialist, and small loans from certain well-off families, the party depends on subscriptions and collections at meetings. Frustrated by lack of action by the right-wing parties, Hitler allies himself with General Ludendorff in an attempt to seize power in Munich by force. November the 9th, 1923. They stage a putsch. The police open fire. Hitler is one of the first to run. Only Ludendorff keeps marching. 16 Nazis are killed. The putsch ends in fiasco. In the years to come, Hitler is to make the 9th of November into a memorial day of bigger and bigger ceremonies. The 16 dead Nazis are turned into national heroes. Truth is buried under a myth of ritual death worship. One gigantic propaganda lie.
Von Pape, Theodor von der Pforten,
But back in 1923, Hitler and Ludendorff are tried for treason before judges who were not exactly unfriendly to their interests. Hitler uses the courtroom for a propaganda outburst which is widely reported in the newspapers. General Ludendorff is acquitted. Hitler himself is sentenced to 5 years' detention in the Landsberg fortress. Here he lives in comfort and begins to dictate Mein Kampf, using Hess as his secretary. Other hands, including Father Stempfler, later to be murdered during the Night of the Long Knives, turn the manuscript into readable form. After less than a year, Hitler is released, but the Nazi Party itself is in ruins. Meanwhile, the young Weimar Republic has found its feet and has gained goodwill abroad. When President Ebert dies, he is succeeded by the aging Field Marshal von Hindenburg, a man who, because of his traditional army background, could never be a Republican, let alone a Democrat. But to the Allied victors, he appears to be a symbol of stability. And so foreign investment, mainly from America and Britain, begins to flow into Germany. A steady rise in the standard of living lulls the people into a state of false security. And so long as the Republic seems to prosper, the Nazis make little headway. But Hitler continues to harangue any audience who will listen to him. New York, October the 24th, 1929. The bottom drops out of the stock market. The economic collapse which shakes all America is soon to shake the world. With an abrupt cutting off of more loans from abroad, the very cornerstone of German economy crumbles. Thousands of small businesses and shopkeepers shut down. Soon, 6 million Germans are out of work. How is it possible, people ask everywhere, for so much poverty to suddenly replace so much prosperity? But Hitler rejoices in this misery of the people. He sees the chance to find new support. He says,
"Never in my life have I been so well disposed and inwardly contented as in these days."
Propaganda has its greatest effect on a people depressed by hunger and lack of work. Poverty inspires revolution. The communists also begin to gain wide support. Scared by this growth of the left, many German industrialists, bankers, and landowners, never friendly to the Republic, now turn to Hitler and his private army of the SA. They believe that he can be bought as a tool to crush the red danger of the organized workers. So, from industry and big finance, the Nazis now get money to step up their propaganda campaign. At meeting after meeting, Hitler promises everything to everybody. Promises to make Germany strong again. He promises to find work for all. He promises every German woman a husband. He promises to tear up the hated Treaty of Versailles. He promises to stamp out corruption in high places. He even promises to curb the power of big industry and finance, those very powers who are paying for this propaganda campaign, a promise he is not to keep. And all the time he promises to smash the Jews. They are to blame for everything, he screams. This is the one promise he is to keep to the bitter end.
Ausgeräumt ist, sondern die Vernichtung der jüdischen Rasse in Europa.
Fighting in the streets is frequent. Among the toughs of the SA is a dissolute young student, Horst Fleck. He has written the words to a song used by his local SA group. He is found killed in the street. Goebbels promptly turns the funeral into a romantic martyr's burial. Another gigantic propaganda lie. The Horst Fleck song is even made the official Nazi hymn and later becomes the second national anthem to Deutschland über alles. In the next few years, Germany is divided by a whole series of elections.
Wenn doch bei dieser kommenden Wahl die Nationalsozialisten verlieren möchten, damit die Bürger in Parteien wird etwas zunehmen. Regierungen kommen und gehen, das Volk ist das Bleibende.
All the same, the Nazi Party multiplies its votes more than 7 times. It is now the second biggest party in the Reichstag. The communists also still steadily gain in numbers. The Social Democrats and the moderate center parties are always the losers. Meanwhile, the army has stood aloof, but watched events with growing alarm. The generals have never supported the Republic. They still dream of a return to the old monarchy. To keep them quiet, Hitler tells them,
I have always held the view that any attempt to undermine the army is madness. We will see to it when we come into power that out of our present Reichswehr, a great army of the German people shall arise.
For the time being, the generals are satisfied. But from this day on, they will never be rid of the Austrian corporal. They will share in his guilt. When the next election for president comes up, Hitler feels strong enough to challenge the 84-year-old Hindenburg, father figure of the German people.
Solange es in Deutschland ein politisches Leben gibt, ist noch nie aus allen Berufen und allen Ständen, allen Lebensstellungen, allen Herkünften eine solche Bewegung aus nichts geschaffen worden.
It is just because the Nazi Party has sprung from nowhere that the many leaders of industry and finance believe that Hitler can be bought as a weapon to serve their ends. January 1932, he addresses a meeting of industrialists in Düsseldorf. Result, more money is subscribed for the party, to be spent on a propaganda campaign the like of which Germany and the world has never seen. Hitler over Germany. The Führer flies from city to city, 20 places in 1 week. The Nazi press screams out that here at last is a man fit to lead the German people. But even with this terrific propaganda onslaught, Hitler loses the election. But the propaganda has had results. The Nazi Party still grows in size. Next move, Chancellor Brüning is forced out of office. A man of the Catholic Center, he has been compelled to rule by emergency laws. The way is now open for far more dangerous men. Wily Franz von Papen and the ambitious General von Schleicher to intrigue together or against each other for the high post of Reich Chancellor, for the goodwill of President Hindenburg, but always against the Republic. By now it is obvious that the Weimar Republic is doomed. It has failed because most Germans believe that it has been foisted on them by the Allied victors of the war. It has never had any real constructive policy of its own. Too many of those who held power in the Kaiser's day have kept their power. It has, alas, been a republic without any real republicans, a democracy without any democrats. But how has Hitler come so close to power without having won a single free election? Let us repeat. First, the industrialists, the financiers and bankers, the landowners, and the army have seen in Hitler their only bastion against the organized workers. Second, the middle classes have remembered the days of inflation. They fear to lose what they have since gained. Third, many of the unemployed have in despair taken to wearing one of Hitler's brown shirts. January the 30th, 1933. Hindenburg gives in to the pressures which surround him from all sides. Adolf Hitler is at last offered the highest post in the land next to that of the president, Reich Chancellor. So triumphs the vagrant from Austria, the hater of Jews and socialists, the sworn enemy of democracy, the believer in brutality. A man who bases his whole political program on lies and propaganda, who sees only himself as the Führer of a future master race. We can control him, say those who put power into his hands. We want to see our leader, cries the crowd. Thus, the Third Reich is born. The first Nazi ceremony is another funeral. Their names are unimportant, barely even remembered.
Und dass auf diesem Grab einmal eine Flamme aufsteigen soll, die ganz Deutschland erleuchten wird.
The Third Reich is ushered in by fire. The whole world asks, did the Nazis themselves set fire to the Reichstag?
This is the beginning of the communist revolution. We will show no mercy. Every communist official must be shot where he is found. Every communist deputy must be strung up this very night.
There is no revolution. But the fire has been a signal, another gigantic propaganda lie. Now the Nazi terror starts in full force. The first concentration camps are opened. Into them, without trial, are cast any who dare to oppose the new rulers, if they have not already been murdered by the stormtroopers. The eyes of the people are diverted from this terror by spectacular parades unseen since the time of Kaiser Wilhelm. Potsdam. Hitler cleverly sets the scene for his first big official event in the very shrine of German militarism and imperial glory. The old heritage is kept alive in the figure of the Reich President himself, symbol of the everlasting military tradition so dear to many Germans. But today a new uniform, the brown-shirted men of the SA, marches along with the relics of the past. Today a new emblem hangs alongside the banners of the old empire. The new party seeks to be on equal footing with the army. The new chancellor is at ease with the veterans of the Reichswehr, Field Marshal von Mackensen and the Crown Prince Wilhelm. Once more, the inevitable parades. First the army, then the nationalists, and finally the street gang army of Hitler's SA. Two days later, the Reichstag meets in its new home, the Kroll Opera House. It is to pass an enabling act, which will strip the delegates of any real future power. Hitler, as Chancellor, will assume it all. The president of the Reichstag, none other than Hermann Goring himself, surveys the proceedings through binoculars. All communist deputies have either been arrested or murdered. Among the many other parties, only the Social Democrats, through Otto Wels, speak out against this ferocious act. All others vote with the Nazis. Outside, the stormtroopers bay.
We want the bill, or else fire and murder.
They get their bill. So also do the German people. Immediately, Goebbels controls all news and information. Propaganda is now completely in power. Every day, the newspapers are told what to write, how to write it, and what not to write. The radio is wholly taken over. Many of the cinema's leading producers know what kind of films the Nazis want. All scripts must now be vetted. The casting of actors must be approved. From now on, the German people will only know what their Führer wants them to know.
Propaganda brought us into power. Propaganda has enabled us to remain in power. Propaganda will enable us to conquer the world.
In his early Munich days, Hitler had taken an old Hindu symbol, the hooked cross, the swastika, as the Nazi symbol. Now he multiplies it 1,000,000 times. From the Romans, he steals the standards which are to dominate every ceremony. From Mussolini, he steals the fascist salute. The people are fed with slogans.
Führer command, we follow you. The Führer is always right.
Hitler is a man who fears the intellect and hates all intellectuals. So into the flames are flung the works not only of German philosophers, scientists, doctors, poets, playwrights, and novelists, but those of all the world. Students as well as stormtroopers obey the Führer's order. Any culture except Nazi culture must be destroyed. May Day, 1933. Up till now, the Nazis had jeered at Labour's traditional day. But now it is to be celebrated as never before. 100,000 workers crowd to the Tempelhof airfield. Whether they like it or not, trade union leaders are flown here from every part of Germany. As always, Hitler first senses the mood of the crowd. Then he tells them,
Deutsche Volksgenossen und Genossinnen. Der Mai ist gekommen.
You will see how untrue and unjust is the statement that our revolution is directed against the German workers. Honor work and respect the worker.
And the very next day, stormtroopers seize all trade union headquarters, steal their funds, and throw any official who resists into a concentration camp. The unions are totally disbanded. In their place, a German workers' front is set up, a compulsory body in which the workers have no say. On July the 14th, the official gazette announces,
the German government has enacted the following law, which is herewith promulgated. Article 1, the National Socialist German Workers' Party constitutes the only political party in Germany.
Hitler can now afford to jeer.
Und ich glaube nicht, dass die Gegner, die damals noch haben, heute auch noch lachen.
But the Führer has one more big problem to face. As early as 1933, he has planned for a European war, for Lebensraum, living space, for the German Herrenvolk. But for a war, he must have the full support of the professional army. The SA, now some 2 million strong, is all very well for striking terror into the people, but it would be useless to fight a modern war. On their part, the stormtroops are restless. Now their Führer is in power, they want their share of the spoils. But for Hitler, the support of the army comes first. An army which has watched with alarm the growing strength of the SA under its Chief of Staff, Ernst Röhm.
Mit das Verdienst, jetzt einzeln, nicht der einfachen SA-Mannes ist. Wenn heute ein anderes Deutschland Welt gegenübersteht.
So when Hitler sets out with the commanders-in-chief of the Army and Navy for spring naval maneuvers, he is thought to have pulled off a secret double deal. Some say he ruthlessly agreed to sacrifice the SA in return for the High Command's promise to back him to succeed the aged Hindenburg when the old man dies. What Hitler did not reveal was Himmler's secret plan to take over a reformed SA and at the same time to build up a new private army, the black uniformed SS, into being the first armed power in the state. June the 30th, 1934, the night of the long knives, one of Hitler's most blatant acts of treachery against his former friends. Not only Röhm and many other SA leaders are murdered, but also Gregor Strasser, General von Schleicher and his wife, and hundreds of others against whom some Nazi bears a private grudge. Hitler declares the killings to be legal. General von Bomberg issues an order of the day to express the army's satisfaction. Now industry is given the green light to speed up the armaments program. Germany must become the strongest nation on earth in all the weapons of death. The people are given yet another new slogan.
Guns before butter.
Also a part of the armament plan are the new autobahns. Impressive highways like these, so often admired by visitors to Germany, had been built in other countries. Only the German people are deceived into believing that such projects need a dictator for their fulfillment. To Hitler, they mean two things: strategic arteries for the war he plans, and a quick way to absorb the unemployed. When President Hindenburg dies, Hitler promptly announces that he himself will now combine the offices of Reich President and Reich Chancellor and become Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, the all-high Führer of the German people. From now on, all officers and men must swear an oath of allegiance not to their fatherland, but to Adolf Hitler. He promises the people,
the German form of life is definitely determined for the next 1,000 years.
It is definitely determined, too, for the Jews in Germany, the arch objects of Hitler's hatred. Already on coming into power, he had proclaimed a national boycott of all Jewish shops. The Jew haters are on the hunt. Every humiliation is heaped upon the Jews. Julius Streicher's obscene newspaper pours out its lies. It's nothing to do with us, say most Germans. Why should we stop and interfere? Now, in 1935, Hitler orders his experts to draw up special laws for the suppression of the Jews. By these, they are degraded as if they were lepers. In whatever trade or profession, they are stripped of almost all they possess. Many who have foreseen what is to happen have been able to flee the country. World-famous scientist Albert Einstein was one. They are the lucky ones. Many, many more remain to be persecuted or done to death. Not only the Jews are thrown into the ever-increasing number of camps, but anyone suspected of uttering a word of protest against the Nazi Party, or who dares to question the supreme authority of the all-high Führer to rule the German people. We're at Berchtesgaden, the mountain retreat that Adolf Hitler has built for himself, overlooking the Bavarian Obersalzberg.
I go the way that Providence dictates with the assurance of a sleepwalker.
We know today the crimes for which this man was responsible, but what do we really know of his private life? At that time, Hitler was a myth to the German people, unreal, remote. He has a fixation about becoming ill. He does not drink or smoke. He is a vegetarian, but he likes cream cakes and sweets. When he relaxes, he likes to have played an old German children's tune. He does not know that the world knows it too. He works either feverishly all through the night, or he doesn't work at all. He either broods or talks for hours without stop. Here he is receiving a visit from the British Legion. He does not keep appointments at the right time and always leaves suddenly in a fast car. He likes being driven fast. Only Himmler knows always where he is to be found. He likes big rooms and thick carpets. His education was small, and now he reads mainly books about war and military matters. He is a man without real home or family. Marriage might shatter the halo of a lone Führer whose only love must be for his people. He does not marry until the day of his eventual suicide. Here, too, lives Eva Braun, who once worked in the shop of Hitler's personal photographer, Hoffmann. Years younger than the Führer, she has succeeded Adolf's first, and some say only, love, Geli Raubal, of whom he was fiercely jealous. She committed suicide in Hitler's flat in Munich in 1931. Destiny, says Hitler, has chosen him to create a strong and happy German people. Old party members visit their Führer at the Berghof, but none of them is on really familiar terms with him. Here is Goebbels, von Ribbentrop, foreign minister. Right Himmler, in the middle Heydrich, his amiable helper, in the center Speer, then Hitler's architect. Martin Bormann, said by some to be still alive. Hitler and Goebbels know the publicity value of the Führer's sentimental fondness for animals and for children. He is photographed with them as often as possible. He likes, too, to be thought of as a man of the people, but the SS guards are never far away. Of this man, who was to be the most photographed in the world, we have no films of his youth in Austria, where he was born in 1889. But we have all seen the familiar photographs of him as a baby, and of his father, a customs official with whom he quarreled. Of his mother, whom he is said to have loved. He came partly from peasant or farm workers' stock. His grandfather was not known, but his family was never poor. At school, young Adolf was not exactly bright. He did not do well. After his father's death, Adolf in 1907 went to Vienna, but was rejected by the Academy of Arts for lack of talent. But he liked to call himself an artist. These sketches for advertisements, believed to have been made when he was 22, reveal how good his art was. In later years, always believing himself to be an artist, Hitler is to dictate to the German people just what kind of art they must admire. His choice must be their choice. He helps to design the House of German Art in Munich. He makes the choice himself of what paintings and sculpture shall be exhibited. The work of all modern imaginative artists is denounced as being degenerate.
The Führer is always right.
From his first days in Vienna, Hitler has worshipped the music of Wagner. As Führer, he is often welcomed to Bayreuth by Winifred Wagner, the composer's daughter-in-law. He claims to have seen Götterdämmerung over 100 times. Hitler was attracted in his youth to the heroic twilight of German mythology through the works of a crank philosopher, Lanz von Liebenfels. Later, his phony racialist, Rosenberg, is to transform this cult into the Nazi concept of a Germanic master race, a barbaric, legendary world, bedeviled by treachery and violence, the bloodbath of the Götterdämmerung, Valhalla going up in flames. Hitler himself said,
"We are barbarians. We want to be barbarians. It is an honorable title."
Hitler knows how deeply rooted in the German tradition is this cult of the Nordic and Teutonic pagan myth world, this morbid love for the void of dark thoughts. Cunningly, he sees how it can be used. From the blood-stained twilight world of Valhalla, it is but a short step to the parades and rallies of the Nazis. The glorification of Germany's traditional strength, always encouraged because it suited those in power, this too is twisted by Hitler to fit his purpose. This worship of uniforms, this hypnotism of men behaving like machines, these have been rooted in German life for many generations. These too Hitler is to use. The goose step turns the human being into a soulless fighting machine which does not ask questions but blindly obeys the orders of the leader. Hitler himself said,
"It is the army which has made men of us all. But when we look upon the army, our faith in the future of our people is always reinforced."
He sees himself as following in the steps of those men who had built Germany into an aggressive nation, Frederick the Great and Bismarck. Not one of the Nazi leaders are men of original thought or ideas. They have simply seized on old ideas and beliefs which have their roots in German history and twisted them to fit the Nazi ideology.
Struggle is the father of all things. Virtue lies in blood. Leadership is fundamental and decisive.
What is new is Hitler's skillful use of modern techniques for putting across his concept of state and people without respect for the individual.
With us, the leader and the idea are one, and every party leader must do what the leader orders.
Mammoth rallies are staged for the masses, like this one every year at Nuremberg. They are filmed and photographed so that the rest of the world may see. And many foreign visitors are deeply impressed. What they do not see, behind the marching and spectacle and music, is the terror of the SS and the Gestapo, the ever-present fear of the concentration camps with their torture and murder with most horrible cruelty. These are not on view. In other countries, Hitler has his imitators. There are always those who mistakenly believe that the Nazis and fascists are a bulwark against communism and socialism. In Britain, Mosley has set up his black shirts and for a time gets serious backing. In the United States, Fritz Kuhn sets up the American Bund, always the same use of violence. In France, there is the Croix de Feu. In Belgium, de Grelle and his Rexist follow the same fascist pattern. The cult of violence can threaten to take root and flourish in any country at any time. What is this Nazi state in which men exist to serve the state and not the state to serve men? The opposite of democracy. First, there must be totality of the whole nation before there can be a total war. Nazism is injected into the universities and schools, into the churches, into the courts of law, into culture and the arts, into agriculture and industry. The Nazi state reaches from the cradle to the grave. Woman's place is in the kitchen and the nursery. But this concept of total domination of a people is perhaps best summed up by a Nazi propaganda film of the time.
We are educating our youth into a healthy outlook on life. With clear fundamentals, the young people are being prepared for living. Sport steels the body. Comradeship gives them the feeling for the folk community. So they become the future of the people. Our youth knows its goal, its great responsibility towards the future generations. No longer by accident, but consciously will the healthy find other healthy ones for a happy and good choice of a marriage partner. Give of your best to your people, then you will belong to the best of all people.
Dann werdet ihr zum besten Volke gehören.
That is Hitler's Germany, now for Hitler and the world. May the 17th, 1933. He proclaims that Germany only desires peace.
The start of a war would be madness without end. It can only lead to the collapse of the present order of society. Germany needs peace.
5 months later, Germany walks out of the League of Nations. He signs a non-aggression pact with Poland. A naval treaty is also signed with Britain, which opens up the way for a strong German navy. Next, Hitler risks bringing in compulsory military service, thus flouting the Treaty of Versailles.
Adolf Hitler, der oberste Befehlshaber der Wehrmacht, hat unser deutsches Vaterland auf!
March 1936. German troops move into the Rhineland. We know today that if the French had shown any fight at all, the Germans would have at once withdrawn. That same year, the Olympic Games are due to be held in Berlin. So the Nazis turn them into a massive propaganda display. Thousands of visitors come from overseas. Some of the foreign competing teams pay homage to the German Führer. When an American Negro, Jesse Owens, wins 3 gold medals, Hitler refuses to shake hands with him. As the world watches sport, General Franco, a new would-be dictator on the European scene, leads a revolt against the Spanish Republican government. Britain, France, and the United States adopt what they call a policy of non-intervention in Spain. Hitler and Mussolini announce a similar policy and promptly send troops, experts, airmen, and equipment to help Franco's army. For the German High Command and war technicians, this is a golden opportunity to experience war in its actuality, a rehearsal for what is to come, especially in aerial warfare. The wholesale rain of death dropped by German planes on the small and undefended town of Guernica shocks the outside world. Helped by the Russians at a price and by volunteers from many countries, the Spanish government holds out for 3 years. The specially formed Condor Legion of the German Luftwaffe returns in triumph to Berlin. Ceremonial homage is paid to the Germans killed in Spain. (1937). The Führer welcomes Mussolini, his fellow dictator from Italy, to the Third Reich. Il Duce is to be impressed with the ever-growing might of Nazi Germany. At a vast meeting in Berlin, Mussolini thanks Germany for her help in his brutal Abyssinian war.
Sind den Sanktionen nicht angeschlossen. Wir werden das niemals vergessen.
And the Führer replies,
Dieser Völkerkundgebung aber ist der aufrichtige Wunsch, unseren Ländern jenen Frieden zu garantieren.
Peace, did Hitler say? In Austria, Hitler's homeland, another little dictator, Dollfuss, has already set himself up. He has smashed the workers' organizations, but only to open up the way for the Austrian Nazis. Dollfuss is murdered. When Schuschnigg, the new prime minister, tries to save what he can by a general vote of the people, Hitler gives orders for his army to march.
I intend to invade Austria with armed forces in order to establish constitutional conditions and to prevent further outrages against the pro-German population. I will direct the whole operation myself.
Only 3 years earlier, he had said,
Whoever lights the torch of war in Europe can wish for nothing but chaos.
always and again, the technique of the big lie, the mask of peace on the face of war. Millions of Austrians welcome the Führer to Vienna, the city he had left as a frustrated and bitter young man. Only some 67,000 people have had first to be arrested by Himmler's SS. March the 14th, 1938. Hitler stands on the balcony above the crowd. He tells them,
I believe that it was God's wish to send a youth from here into Germany, to let him grow up and to raise him to be the leader of the nation, so that he could lead back his homeland into the Third Reich.
Neues Glied, die Nationalsozialistische Partei und die Wehrmacht unseres Reiches. Sieg heil!
To thank Mussolini for his support in the seizure of Austria, Hitler now goes to visit his friend, this time for a fully fledged state visit for the artistically minded Führer to admire the antiquities of the ancient Roman Empire. How could such a man, who can find time for such harmless trips abroad, how can he desire more aggression in Europe? A friendly meeting between two accomplices. Little King Victor and Manuel seem somewhat left out of the picture. Peace, did Hitler say? Next move, Czechoslovakia.
I give my word of honor that Czechoslovakia has nothing to fear from the Third Reich.
But Hitler declares,
it is my unalterable decision to smash Czechoslovakia by military action in the near future.
Britain's Prime Minister, Chamberlain, believes he can save peace. With Daladier, Prime Minister of France, Chamberlain flies to Munich in an attempt to stop war in Czechoslovakia. September the 29th, 1938. 4 men sign an agreement. Hitler gets the Czech Sudetenland and the vital Czech defense lines and heavy industry. The Czechs, whose fate is sealed, are not present. Hitler is given a bloodless victory. At this moment in world history, all men who believed in freedom and justice hung their heads in shame. 6 months later, Hitler breaks the Munich Agreement. His army and the SS march into all Czechoslovakia. She is the first democracy in Europe to become a German slave state. The triumphant Hitler shouts to his secretaries,
this is the greatest day of my life. I shall go down in history as the greatest German.
He has again taken the chance, and again his bluff has come off. Now influential foreign personages pay their respectful homage to the all-conquering Führer. What can they report that Hitler has achieved for the German people? In 7 years, he has got back the Rhineland, torn up the Treaty of Versailles, annexed Austria, occupied Czechoslovakia, made good friends with Mussolini in Italy and Franco in Spain, and found an ally in distant Japan. In the same 7 years at home, he has wiped out unemployment and built up Germany's armed strength without equal in the world. But the German people do not realize that all this has been achieved only by lies, by blackmail, by bluff, and by outright violence and murder, and none of it can last without a war. To the German people, many of them politically immature and lulled into a state of hypnotic worship by the newsreels and mass demonstrations, their beloved leader has everything under the control of his genius and inner instinct. Berlin, April the 20th of this critical year of 1939. The Supreme Führer, soon to become the great warlord and military genius, celebrates his 50th birthday. Has he not told the world?
The principal effect of war is to destroy the flower of a nation. Germany needs peace and desires peace.
As the storm clouds gather over Europe, even Mr. Chamberlain is now alarmed. President Roosevelt sends a special message to the two dictators to keep the peace in Europe. To this, Hitler replies without actually answering a single point. We know today that if an understanding could have been reached between East and West, Hitler might not have gone to war. But the British conservatives do not trust the Russians. The Poles will not allow a single Russian soldier to set foot in Poland. Stalin, failing to get an agreement with the Western democracies, now decides to come to terms with his deadly enemy and signs the Soviet-German Pact. So the warlord-to-be gets all he wants: a diplomatic triumph and an almost free hand to launch a new attack. The country, Poland. The date, September the 1st, 1939. He tells his generals,
I shall give a propagandist reason for starting the war, regardless of whether it is plausible or not. The victor will not be asked afterwards whether he told the truth. In starting and waging war, it is not right that matters, but victory.
From now on, the supreme warlord in person is to conduct the strategy of the war. To his commanders, he gives this message.
Close your hearts to pity. Be brutal. 80 million people must obtain what is theirs. Be harsh. The stronger is always right.
So, with calculated and callous brutality, the will of one man starts the most violent and bloody of all wars. Civilians are to suffer as much as armies. Millions of homeless and hungry people will stream along the roads of Europe. From his headquarters in a specially equipped railway coach, the Führer orders an all-out air blitz on Warsaw. The lessons learned in Spain are now put into action.
Men capable of leadership in Poland must be liquidated. Those who follow them must be liquidated in their turn. There is no need to send these elements to concentration camps in the Reich.
So begin the mass killings, the first of millions. After the murder of Poland, the blitzkrieg is switched against the West. Denmark, Norway, Belgium, Holland, all are raped.
The violation of the neutrality of the Netherlands and Belgium is unimportant. No one will question it when victory is won.
Now it is the turn of the French people to suffer. Interlude. The Führer meets Il Duce in Munich. Mussolini is anxious not to miss his share of the plunder. At Hitler's orders, the armistice is signed in the same railway coach that was used when the Germans signed their surrender in 1918, at the same spot in the forest at Compiègne. Revenge is sweet. London, September 1940. Britain is bombed nightly with terrible hurt. At the same time, packs of U-boats threaten Britain's lifelines in the Atlantic. So Britain is cut off, alone.
England's situation is hopeless. The war has been won by us. A reversal of the prospects of success is impossible.
the great warlord is wrong. British fighters blast Goering's Luftwaffe out of the daylight sky. Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain, is postponed. At his headquarters, Hitler confers with his high command, or rather gives them orders. The military genius tells his generals,
the German armed forces must be prepared to crush Soviet Russia in a quick campaign before the end of the war against England.
Since the summer of 1940, Hitler has been planning an all-out attack on Soviet Russia, despite their pact. But before he can put Operation Barbarossa into action, he must protect his rear. The horizon does not look bright. Despite all the swift German victories in Europe, Mussolini has suffered humiliating defeat by the British in North Africa. In Britain, the British people still stand firm. In Spain, Franco will give no aid. So to force his hand, Hitler speeds to a meeting on the Spanish frontier. Did he not help Franco in his civil war? But although the dictators confer for 9 hours, despite all the friendly smiles and handshakes for the newsreel cameras, Franco does not commit himself to enter the war. Next, the aged Pétain signs a treacherous agreement. Yet he too will not agree to France going to war against Britain. Then in Florence, Hitler finds that his friend Mussolini has moved behind his back and invaded Greece, only to meet with defeat. So before launching his attack on Russia, the Führer invades Yugoslavia and Greece. Operation Barbarossa is put back by 4 weeks. Bulgaria, Romania, and Hungary have all become German satellites. The swastika is now hoisted over the Acropolis in Athens. The warlord is soon to set up his new headquarters, the Wolfschanze, or Wolf's Lair, near Rustenburg in a remote forest in East Prussia. From here, he conducts the strategy of the great battle against Russia. On a 1,000-mile front from the Baltic to the Black Sea, the German divisions attack. The Russians burn all they leave behind, so that nothing of value should fall into the hands of the invader. Scorched earth, they call it. Russian prisoners are taken by the thousand. Says Reichsmarschall Goring,
in the camps for Russian prisoners, they have begun to eat each other. This year, between 20 and 30 million persons will die of hunger in Russia. Perhaps it is as well that this should be, because certain nations must be wiped out.
Within 3 months, it looks certain that Russia's 2 greatest cities, Moscow and Leningrad, must fall. Says the warlord in a moment of triumph,
we have only to kick in the door, and the whole rotten structure will come crashing down.
And is not the Führer always right? But neither city falls. The Red Army fights back with a ferocity that the German armies have not met before. The whole campaign is 4 weeks behind plan. Those fatal 4 weeks lost when Hitler massacred Yugoslavia and Greece. The grim Russian winter bogs down the German armies, up till now invincible. Hitler's troops are without proper clothing or equipment. The military genius had neglected to plan for a winter campaign. At the Wolfschanze, the warlord sacks some of his generals and takes over as commander-in-chief himself. He explains.
This little matter of operational command is something that anyone can do. The task of commander-in-chief is to train the army in a national socialist way. I know of no general who could do it as I want it done. So I have decided to take over the command myself.
December the 7th, 1941. Out of a clear sky, Japan attacks the United States at Pearl Harbor in the Pacific. 4 days later, the Fuhrer declares war on America. A vast new power is now to be reckoned with. Meanwhile, in all the conquered lands of Europe, Adolf Hitler's promised new order is being brought into force. Heinrich Himmler, supreme head of the SS, speaks about it.
What other nations can offer in the way of good blood of our type, we will take, if necessary, by kidnapping their children and raising them among us. Whether other nations live in prosperity or starve to death like cattle interests me only insofar as we need them as slaves for our Kultur. Whether 10,000 Russian women fall down from exhaustion while digging an anti-tank ditch interests me only insofar as the anti-tank ditch for Germany is finished.
Here speaks Erich Koch, Reich Commissar for the captured Ukraine.
We are a master race and must remember that the lowliest German worker is racially and biologically 1,000 times more valuable than the population here.
All so-called undesirable elements, all Jews and most Slavs and Gypsies as well, are to be exterminated by straight murder or by being worked to death. From the occupied countries, the Nazis plunder all they can find. Food stocks are the first to be sent back to Germany. Says Hermann Goring to his subordinates,
whenever you come across anything that might be needed by the German people, be after it like a bloodhound. It must be taken out and brought to Germany.
In this way, Goering steals hundreds of treasures from the museums and art galleries of the terrorized lands for his private collection. From all the occupied countries, too, thousands upon thousands of human beings are marched to Germany to be used as forced labor in the mines and fields and factories. A vast army of slaves is created to work under hideous conditions for the master race. 7.5 million civilians from all parts of Europe are slaving for the Third Reich, to which add 2 million prisoners of war. After the rape of Poland, the Germans wall up some 400,000 Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto, sealed off from the rest of the city. Every Jew here, and wherever Germans rule, must now carry special papers and wear the Star of David. They are allowed just enough food to keep about half their number barely alive. But still they do not die off fast enough to satisfy Hitler and Himmler, who are determined that the only fate for the Jews of Europe is their systematic extermination, what is called the final solution. Each day in the ghetto, the Jews are rounded up from their homes or on the streets. Some who are still able to work must work in the ghetto factories for the SS. Others, the less fortunate ones, are herded to the railway sidings. They are told that resettlement trains will take them to the countryside where they can settle peacefully. In actuality, their destination is one or other of the extermination camps. Not only in Poland, but from all over Nazi Europe, the wheels of the death trains roll. These pictures were taken by an SS cameraman in Holland. A mass transport of human flesh from the Ukraine, from Hungary, from the Balkans, Greece and Italy, from the West, France, Belgium, Austria and Holland, shipped in cattle trucks, mostly without food or water. Thousands die on the way. On arrival at huge and specially designed camps, they are greeted by music from loudspeakers, partly to lull their suspicions. They still do not know what will happen to them, partly to drown the screams of those being done to death. Next comes the process of selection. SS doctors make snap decisions on sight. Those who are judged still to be in a fit state to work are ordered one way to the factories near the camp. All others, the old, the pregnant, the mothers with children, and the children themselves, are herded to the gas chambers. After death, their bodies will be burnt in the cremation ovens. More than 1,600,000 children alone die in this way. To save time, many of the small children are thrown into the cremation ovens alive. Several companies compete to supply the required apparatus for these camps. Here is a letter from the firm of I.A. Topf and Sons of Erfurt.
For putting the bodies into the furnace, we suggest simply a metal fork moving on cylinders. Each furnace will have an oven measuring only 24 by 18 inches, as coffins will not be used. For transporting the corpses from the storage points to the furnaces, we suggest using light carts on wheels, and we enclose diagrams of these drawn to scale. Heil Hitler.
At Auschwitz in Poland, it is possible to dispose of up to 6,000 bodies in one day. For those who do not die in this way, there are the so-called medical experiments involving incredible pain and certain death. Men, women, and children are used in experiments of freezing, castration, transfer of cancer cells, and other experiments. Well-known German industrial firms set up factories close to the camps to make use of the cheap labor. It is a profitable transaction both for the SS and the businessmen. There are also valuable sidelines. When dead, the human body has many things worth money. Bones, hair, gold from teeth, even artificial limbs, all are carefully collected by the camp guards for selling in the best market. Yet in spite of all this barbarism and brutal suppression, resistance breaks out all over occupied Europe. The people begin to fight back with amazing courage. But savage German reprisal is always quick to follow. Heydrich, the bloody Reich protector, is assassinated. Hundreds are promptly executed. But the most terrible of all the reprisals is the total destruction of the village of Lidice near Prague, a village that had no proved connection whatever with Heydrich's death. Under the command of Captain Max Rostock, security police shoot every man and boy out of hand. All women are sent to the camps. All children are sent to Auschwitz. The village itself is then systematically destroyed, house by house. The SS is so proud of its work that it is filmed by an official cameraman. Finally, the site will be flattened.
We are barbarians. We want to be barbarians. It is an honorable title.
(1942), the Fateful Year. After great successes by General Rommel in North Africa, the tide is turned by the British under General Montgomery at El Alamein. More Allied landings are made along the African coast, and finally the Allies press on to Tunis and across to Sicily and southern Italy. On the Russian front, the battle for Stalingrad goes on, but the end is near. Colonel General von Paulus radios his Führer.
Troops without ammunition or food. Further defense senseless. Collapse inevitable. Army requests permission surrender in order to save lives of remaining troops.
But the warlord is not interested in lives. He replies,
Surrender forbidden. 6th Army will hold their positions to the last man and the last round, and by their heroic endurance will make an unforgettable contribution toward the establishment of a defensive front and the salvation of the Western world.
On January the 31st, 1943, 91,000 German troops, 24 generals, and General von Paulus himself surrender. Had the Führer cared for human lives, had he allowed von Paulus to surrender earlier, thousands of both German and Russian lives might have been saved. Now it is the Germans who are being made prisoner by the thousand. It is obvious to the whole world that at last German aggression is halted. Obvious to all but the Nazis, who act as if El Alamein and Stalingrad had been German victories.
Der Reichsmarschall. Generalfeldmarschall Keitel, Großadmiral Dönitz, Reichsführer SS Himmler, Generalfeldmarschall von Bock, Generalfeldmarschall Milch, Reichskriegsopferführer Oberlin-Ober.
In Berlin, Heroes' Remembrance Day is celebrated as usual. Is bombed night and day. Berlin and other German cities are now tasting what the Luftwaffe gave to Warsaw, Rotterdam, London, Coventry, Belgrade, and so many other cities. But not in one single bombed city does the Führer show his face. It is left to Dr. Goebbels to keep up the nation's morale. Inspired by promises of Allied landings in Europe, the resistance in the occupied countries grows bolder. Underground newspapers are printed. Leaflets appear from nowhere in the streets. Hundreds of acts of sabotage are carried out. Some 60,000 Jews, all who are left in the Warsaw ghetto, turn on their tormentors and fight back with homemade weapons. Once more, German reprisal is swift and terrible. From Warsaw, SS Brigade Führer and Major General of the Police, Jürgen Stroop, reports,
I decided, therefore, to destroy the entire Jewish area by setting every block on fire. The Jews stayed in the burning buildings until, through fear of being burned alive, they jumped from the upper stories. This is the only final method of forcing this trash of subhumanity to surrender. the former Jewish quarter of Warsaw no longer exists.
At the outbreak of war, 10 million Jews were living in the territories to be overrun by the Nazis. By any reckoning, at least 5 million have now been killed because of the insane hatred of one man and his followers. In Germany itself, there has also been resistance to the Nazis since the first day of the Third Reich. But the terror and torture of the Gestapo and the SS have kept such outbreaks secret. Only twice has Hitler been forced to let this opposition become public. First, in 1943, when Sophie Scholl and her brother Hans led a students' revolt at Munich University, for which they were both executed. Second, on July the 20th, 1944, when a group of high-ranking officers contrived to place a time bomb in the Wolfschanze. 4 people are killed and many injured, but Hitler himself escapes with minor injuries. That same afternoon, he received his friend from Italy and reenacts the scene.
After my miraculous escape from death today, I am more than ever convinced that it is my fate to bring our common enterprise to a successful conclusion.
But the plotters are caught and given a trial which, even by Nazi standards, is a savage mockery of justice, under the control of the notorious Roland Freisler, president of the People's Court.
Sie sind ja ein Schäbjolum!
The whole trial is filmed so that the Führer can see each night how Nazi justice is dispensed. All are found guilty. Says Hitler,
They must be hanged like cattle.
they are, with piano wire from meat hooks. Slow strangulation, of which also a film was made, too horrible to show. 7,000 people are arrested by the Gestapo, and nearly 5,000 of them are put to death. Up to the end of the war, some 130,000 Germans are tried in secret and either executed or murdered. Mostly workers, but also priests, doctors, students, men and women of both left and right beliefs. This is the other Germany, whose struggle must go on the record. They were few, but their martyrdom still shines. Major Otto Römer, who helped to smash the July the 20th plot, is made a general. He addresses his men.
Wir sind heute Gottlob politische Soldaten. Unser politischer Auftrag lautet Sicherung unseres Lebensraums, Verteidigung unseres deutschen Vaterlandes, Verteidigung unserer nationalsozialistischen Idee, und wir werden diesen politischen Auftrag unter allen Umständen durchführen bis zu unserem endgültigen Sieg.
June the 6th, 1944. The Allies land on the beaches of Normandy. Military genius now has to face attack on 4 fronts, from the west, from the east, from the south, from Italy, and up from the Balkans. but German lives are still thrown into the hopeless struggle. Civilians are taught to use arms. Take this weapon, they are told, and you will stop the Russians. Even the very young and the very old are pressed into service. During these last months, it is again Dr. Goebbels who desperately strives to keep up the people's morale. Many still believe that the Führer's genius will save them. Much vaunted secret weapons are launched against Britain. For a time, they cause havoc, but nothing can now stop the Allied advance across Europe. One by one, the occupied cities are liberated. Once more, people are to know the meaning of freedom. One by one, the Allied armies come upon the concentration camps. Here, too, people are waiting for freedom. At last, the world outside the Third Reich can see the full horror of what up to now has been kept hidden. Dachau, Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, Ravensbrück, Chelmno, Mauthausen, Auschwitz, Majdanek, Sobibor, Treblinka. Each gives up its secrets, and there are many, many more. This is part of the bill that has to be paid for the Third Reich. Not in money, but in human suffering beyond all belief. Are these still human beings? To this man, is this just another fiend in uniform come to torture him? Some are still alive to tell their stories. Others are too weak for even food to help them. Here are the splintered shooting blocks. Here are walls bearing the imprint of fingers trying to escape from burning. In some camps, as the liberating armies come near, the SS shot the inmates so that they should not be alive to tell of the horror. Here, as in so many places, all that can be done is to give the unburied dead a mass grave. Now it can be really understood what Adolf Hitler meant when he said,
"We are barbarians. We want to be barbarians. It is an honorable title."
But the war is not yet quite over. The great Führer has still some more medals to hand out. As there were no films of his beginning, so there are no films of his end. This is the last picture taken of him. He now lives in a deep shelter or bunker 50 feet below the Reichschancellery in Berlin, a sick and broken man kept alive by drugs. The Russians batter at the doors of Berlin. Hitler gives orders for a wholesale destruction within Germany. His last aim is to drag down the German people with him into a blazing Gotterdammerung. He declaims,
If the war is lost, the nation will also perish. This fate is inevitable. Those who will remain after the battle are only the inferior ones. The good ones will all have been killed.
Has he forgotten?
The German form of life is definitely determined for the next 1,000 years.
He dictates his last will and testament.
It is untrue that I or anybody else in Germany wanted a war in 1939.
So he lies to the bitter end. On May the 1st, 1945, the German radio interrupts its program.
Our Führer, Adolf Hitler, fighting to the last breath against Bolshevism, fell for Germany this afternoon in his operational headquarters in the Reich Chancellery.
The truth is that the Führer, the great warlord and leader of the master race, who has led his people and his armies to utter defeat, had taken his own life and that of his newly wedded wife, Eva Braun, the day before. Thus, to all who put their belief in him as their leader, he has shirked his final responsibility. This is what Adolf Hitler has left to the German people. A 1,000-year Reich, which has lasted 12 years. He was a man wholly dedicated to his evil mission. He was a man who broke his pledges but carried out his threats. He was a man who lied to all, even to himself. But Hitler came into power and kept his power only with the help of those who tried to use him for their own profit, because they feared the freedom of the people. And for this, a world came very near to dying.